So that's a very important lesson for innovators, because often innovation is not about creating brand new things. It's about how you can spot how to bring together things that already exist, and by bringing them together in a new kind of way, create new kind of value. So if you're dealing with housing, communities, families, there aren't that many new things, but what there are new combinations or alignments of those things. Where does that kind of stuff come from? Well, I just want to tell you 3 stories of people that I have met who, interacting with them, changed my sense of where public value comes from and how you create better solutions with people. And each of these stories taught me very, very important lessons. The first was a woman that I met in a town in the north of England called Blackburn, called Anne Rhodes. And Anne Rhodes is a testimony to public services. She has a very acute form of cerebral palsy. She's lucky to be alive. She's only alive because she had a series of operations when she was very young. And she's been continually dependent on public services throughout her life. At the age of 17, when she left school, she went to a special school, she left school, and she was introduced to something called an employment resource centre on the edge of Blackburn, where she was given a choice on the first morning, which was, what do you want to do? Do you want to do tapestry, sewing, or do you want to do basket making? And she'd never done either, and so she said, well, I'll do tapestry. So she did tapestry from 10 o'clock to lunchtime. She had lunch, then she did a bit more tapestry, and then she got the bus, and then she went home. And then she did the same for the next day. Basically, she did the same for about 15 years. And that was because in the act of saving her, public services had sort of entrapped her. And they'd entrapped her because they never dared to attend to whether she wanted to do something different, or indeed whether she was capable of it, because they just assumed that she wasn't. When that centre got taken over by a new management with a very kind of simple philosophy, they just started having a conversation with her. Not a form, not an interview, a conversation over a cup of coffee. And by attending to her, by taking the time to bother to look into her eyes and listen to what she was saying, they found out that she wanted a job. Now, the previous service would have said, oh, you want a job, we don't do jobs, we can send you to the job service down here. But the new approach said, okay, you want a job, first thing we better do is get you some training so you're ready for work. So they sent her a day a week on a training course at a local college. They organised the transport. She came back from 6 months, cost nothing, and said, okay, that's great, I want a job. So then they sent an email around the social services department in Blackburn and said, Anne Rhodes wants a job, has anyone got a job? And a daycare centre said, yeah, we've got a job because we've got several children with cerebral palsy and Anne would make a great teacher. So now she works a day a week at this daycare centre. Anne Rhodes says, for the first time in my life, I feel normal. I feel part of society. So this is an example of how public services can simultaneously save people and imprison them. And unless they're prepared to really connect with people, attend to them and work with them and to see them as potential contributors and makers of their own lives, you won't get out of that cycle. You can see that story written at a much higher level. All you need to do is get on the train from Copenhagen and go to a place called Ishoy. Because when you go to Ishoy and you get off the train and you walk into the housing estate, the first thing that strikes you is what an amazing housing estate it is. When I went, I couldn't believe it. I thought, this is impossible. This isn't public housing. This looks like a kind of modern yuppie apartment development. It's incredible. But then the deeper you get in, the more you realize it's almost like a prison, because it's completely socially cut off. Great buildings, fantastic infrastructure, close to the city, but completely socially isolated. So at the same time as saving people, we can ensnare and entrap them. The second person that I met who changed the way that I think is a guy called Alf. Alf lived in a caravan, like a mobile home. He'd lived with his mother had died, he was left to his own devices, living in a caravan. And it was in Kent, which is a county in the south, just south of London. And Alf each week, at weekends, he would get his shopping bags and he would cross the dual carriageway and then walk up to the village and come back with his shopping, and that was it for the week. On this particular weekend, as he was crossing the road, he got hit by a car, broke his hip and pelvis, ended up in hospital. Now, anyone at Alf's age, if you go into hospital, this is a tricky thing. The longer you stay in hospital, the more institutionalized you become. The more you become an object of the medical system, and the less you see yourself as a kind of agent or someone who's capable of changing your own life. That's what happened to Alf. At the end of 6 weeks, when he was just about ready to get back up on his feet, the social services department dealing with him went to look at his caravan and realized that they couldn't put him there. He wasn't ready to go and live on his own, and he didn't want to go to a care home because that was years of dependency and very, very high cost. So luckily, they had just created nearby a recuperative care centre. And the recuperative care centre took Alf, and he was one of their first people. And what they do is very, very simple. They work with people, work out what their strengths, but also what their weaknesses are, work intensively on building up their own capability and confidence, and then they gradually withdraw their service. They don't keep it going. The best thing is actually to withdraw it, to know when to step back, because as you step back, the person has to take their own responsibility. So this is a hard discipline because the care workers working with Alf wanted to help him. But actually the best way to help him was to get him into a state where they could stand back and he could start doing things himself. And so eventually, that's what happened to Alf. He left, he went to live in a flat on his own in the nearby village. He became an active part of the community. He had a huge flat screen television in which he watched football, and when you went to have tea with him, he would serve you tea with biscuits on a kind of doily. But that wouldn't have been possible if at that critical juncture the public service had thought this guy is incapable, we better take charge of him, because that would have condemned him to years of dependency. The final story is a remarkable couple, Sam and Caroline Tomlinson. Caroline, the mother, Sam, the son, who I met in Wigan in a discussion amongst mothers about children with learning disabilities. So these were all mothers who had children who had learning disabilities. And Caroline was the most inspirational, charismatic, determined woman in this group. Sam was 17 at the time, and he'd just left school, and he was going to college, and he had severe learning disabilities. He wanted to go to school with every other 17-year-old in Wigan on the bus. So when Caroline said to the council, the local authority, can Sam go to school on the bus? They said, no, because A, we have a contract with a taxi firm, which means that it would waste money if he went on the bus, and B, to send him on the bus, we'd need to send 2 social workers with him to make sure that he was okay. So Caroline said, well, what if you gave me the money and I employed 2 young people at the college who are studying care qualifications to go with him, then he can go on the bus, it'll cost less, and they will learn how to work with someone in real life on a bus. How about that? And so when Caroline switched to a personalised budget so she could commission care, that's what she did. And Caroline says, if you give me £10, I know more about Sam than anyone, and I will make that £10 go better, further, farther than any local authority. trust me. So what that taught me in a very sort of particular way, sitting with this group of mothers, all with children, adult, grown-up children like Sam, was two things, I suppose. The first is that there are ways of locating where you make decisions which can be much more insightful and mobilize people's knowledge and capabilities than assuming that professionals know best. It's not always the case. It needs to be done with care and thought, but actually if you locate it properly with people, you can get better, more effective solutions, both for them, but also for public spending and for public value.